All right, good morning, Math 8. Here we go. We got our second lesson in Unit 1. So, first lesson, we did one step to solve equations, and now we're going to see what happens when we need to take two steps to solve equations. So, when we're using these properties of equality in math, the properties of equality can actually be used in any order that you want, because the properties of math work at any time, as long as you use them correctly. But the most efficient way, probably the easiest way to do our properties of equality is to do it in this order. Always try to do addition and subtraction, to both sides of the equation first, and then do the multiplication or division property of equality. So it's kind of like backwards to how we would do order of operations. Order of operations, we would do multiplication first, but here we're going to want to do addition or subtraction first. All right, so here we go. We're going to approach our problems. We're going to draw a nice little line down the middle to show that there's two sides of the equation. If we do one thing to one side, we have to do it to the other side. Okay, so first one, I've got multiplication and I've got subtraction. So remember, we use inverse operations. The inverse of -4, because I'm going to add or subtract first, is +4. So I'm going to use the addition property of equality and add 4 to both sides of the equation. So that's my first step. Add 4 to both sides. Add 4 to both sides. All right, so that's going to leave me with 5x, because the 4's have reduced each other on that side of the equation. On the other side, 16 plus 4 is 20. Okay, now I've got 5 times x. The inverse of multiplication is division, so I'll use the division property of equality and divide both sides by the same number. Divide this side by 5, divide that side by 5. What am I left with? Well, this is going to become 1, because 5 divided by 5 is 1, so 1x, or just x, and then 20 divided by 5 is 4. All right. I think at this point you could probably try the next 5 problems on your own. If you want to see how it works, you can pause at this point. If not, you can just watch me keep on doing them. All right, so I'm going to go. So hopefully you've unpaused if you've already tried these on your own. Let's do it. So line down the middle. I've got multiplication of -2, addition of +10. So I'm going to do the inverse operation, subtract 10 from both sides. So I'm combining these like terms over here. And these make 0. I get -2y equals negative and negative is still negative. So we add the two numbers, we get -24. Now I divide both sides by -2. This on this side, that reduces to 1. We want to double check that because sometimes we forget negatives. We want to make sure that it does reduce completely on that side. Okay, it's just something we double check. -24 divided by -2, +12. Next. Okay, this is +1 and -3 times b. So let's put the line down the middle. I'm going to do the opposite of +1. I'm doing my addition and subtraction property first. I subtract 1 from both sides. That leaves me with -3b on the left side, and 13 minus 1 is 12 on the right side. Okay, this is -3 times b, so we're down to the second property. All right, so we're down to the second property. Sorry about the bell. We're going to divide by -3 on both sides. All right, so these reduce to 1, and I get b is equal to 12 divided by -3 is -4. Moving on. Okay, I'm going to draw the line down the middle, and this is just making sure that I'm not going to accidentally do something to only one side of the equation. I have to do it to both sides because they're properties of equality. You have to do it to both sides, equal. So I'm going to subtract the 5 first. So I'm going to do my addition property or subtraction property of equality first. These make 0. I get 3a is equal to 5 minus 5 is 0. This is 3 times a, so I'll use the division property of equality and divide by 3 on both sides. All right, this becomes 1 over there, and a is equal to 0 divided by 3 is still 0. Number 5. So on this one, our variable is on the right-hand side of the equation. It's still solved the same way. We're going to do the inverse operation for positive 8 and the inverse operation for 6. It's fine that it's on the other side of the equation. So I'll start by doing the inverse of positive 8, which is negative 8. Use my subtraction property of equality, do it to both sides. On this side of the equation, we are left with 24. For a second there, my brain wasn't working. And then 6r. The 8's make 0. Second step of our two-step equation, divide by 6. 24 divided by 6 is 4. So r is equal to 4 because on this side equation that becomes 1r or just r. I do like to leave my answer with the variable on the left-hand side. So we can just flip this around and write r is equal to 4. Final answer. All right, we are really moving. Here we go. Next one. Positive 17, negative 10 times t. So I need to subtract 17 with my subtraction property of equality. So over here, that makes 0. So I'm left with negative 10t on that side of the equation. Over here, 23 plus 17 is 40, and they're both negative, so it's negative 40. And now, negative 10 times t. So we'll use the division property of equality and divide by negative 10 on both sides. This makes 1, so I'm left with t on that side. On this side, negative 40 divided by negative 10 is positive 4. And then I would just flip it around to have the t on this side. All right, so all that, we were using the division property of equality second. Let's recover how to do the multiplication property of equality when we have fractions. So here, I'm going to start the same way, subtraction property of equality. Subtract 2, wrong color. Subtract 2 from both sides. Delicious. All right, so those became 0. I'm left with x over 7 equals negative 4. All right, so this is x divided by 7. Remember we talked about how division, the denominator is what we're dividing by. So to do the inverse operation of division, I would multiply. So I will use my multiplication property of equality and multiply both sides by 7. So multiply by 7, divide by 7, those reduce each other and become 1. So I end up with x on the left, and negative 4 times 7 is negative 28. Okay, so our next problem here, I've got 11 minus y over 3, so that's positive 11, so adding 11, and then dividing by a negative 3. So we'll start by the subtraction property of equality. All right, so I did the wrong color. Dang it. All right, so those make 0. I'm left with negative y over 3. Remember that negative can go with the top or the bottom, so we're going to make it go with the bottom. So there's negative 3 down there. And on the other side, 15 minus 11 is 4. So I'm dividing by negative 3, so the inverse operation is to multiply by negative 3. So we multiply both sides by negative 3. These would reduce each other to make 1, and we would get y equals negative 12. Moving on. Oops. So I'm going to start by adding 38 to both sides. So inverse operations, add 38. Negative 32 plus 38. One's positive, one's negative, so I'm going to subtract those two numbers and then keep the sign of the bigger number, so it's going to be a negative number. So that becomes negative 4. And then on this side, we get 2/3 b. All right, so that's times 2 divided by 3. So you can do it in 2 steps at this point. Or you can multiply by the multiplicative inverse. We talked about that in the last lesson, which would be the inverse 3/2. So this says multiply by 2, divide by 3. So we can multiply by 3, divide by 2 to undo it. All right, so 3 times negative 4 is negative 12/2. So I did the multiplication first, and I'm going to do the division second. On the other side, we've got b by itself, and then negative 12 divided by 2 ends up being negative 6. So final answer, negative 6 equals b, and I like to write it like this, b equals negative 6. Just because. All right, last 3 problems. Now, all of the answers that we've done up top have come out as integers, right? No fractions. Okay, just because you get a fraction doesn't mean that you did the problem wrong. A lot of people get a fraction like, oh, this problem doesn't work. Well, yeah, you can get a fraction answer. That doesn't mean that it's wrong. Okay, so sometimes your answers will be fractions. If that freaks you out, just go back to your steps, because you're going to be a good person and write down all your steps. Go back to each step, double check your work. If your work looks sound and it's right, then the answer is just a fraction. I'd prefer if you leave all of your answers as reduced improper fractions or common fractions. Okay, so just reduce them if they can be reduced and leave it as a fraction. I don't want you overusing your calculators. Don't give me decimal answers. That's overusing your calculators, okay? We want to do improper fractions because it helps later on with linear equations, and you'll see what I mean in about a month or so. All right, so over here, drawing the line down the middle, that's going to force me to do something to both sides. Subtract 8. Everything's going swimmingly, and I am winning at life. So I get 12x. Other side. Negative 14, negative 8, that comes out to negative 22. Division property of equality, divide by 12. Oh no, 12 doesn't go into 22. I didn't do anything wrong, just 12 doesn't go into 22. So I'm getting right now x equals negative 22/12. I have to ask myself, what number goes into 22 and 12? Does it reduce? Yes, because 2 goes into both of those. So if I divide the top and the bottom by 2, I will reduce my fraction. I get x equals 22 divided by 2 is 11. 12 divided by 2 is 6. Negative 11/6 just happens to be our answer on this one. Doesn't mean it's incorrect. It's just our answer. I can double check to go, did I do it right? Yep, that was negative 22 divided by 12. Yeah, everything looks right. So our answer is just a fraction. All right, next one. We're going to use our addition property of equality. Add 6 to both sides. We get negative 4/3 t equals 18. Okay, we're going to use our multiplicative inverse. We're going to multiply by the inverse. It means we're going to flip it. So I'm going to change it to negative 3/4. So I've just flipped the two numbers. I decided to put the negative on top. I usually put the negative on top. Remember, it goes on the top or the bottom, not both. So I decided to put it on top. I just usually do that. So negative 3/4. Okay, So over here, the multiplicative inverse reduces this to 1. So I get t equals, all right, 18 times negative 3. You might need to pull out your calculator, and that's fine. It's negative 54, I think. Pretty sure. All right, so we look at that. I see that both numbers end in an even number, so 2 has to go into this. So I'm going to reduce it. And that gives me my final answer. Negative 54 divided by 2 is negative 27, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. That's my final answer. I don't want you to give me the answer of negative 13.5. Leave it as an improper fraction that's been reduced. We call that a common fraction. All right, almost there. Last one. This was long. Maybe these are too many problems. I don't know. 16 minutes, dang. All right, let's just move. Let's get done and get out of here. I got 2 more videos to do this morning. Subtract 25, subtract 25. We got negative 9c equals negative 3. This is negative 9 times c, so I divide by negative 9 on both sides. That becomes 1 on the left-hand side equation. So 1c, or just c, equals negative 3 divided by negative 9. That's positive 3 over 9 because a negative divided by a negative is positive. So, is the answer 3? No, because your denominator is bigger. So you can't have an answer of 3 on this one because your denominator is the bigger number. 9 over 3 is 3, but 3 over 9 is not 3. So we're going to divide the top and the bottom by 3. And we end up with 3 divided by 3 is 1. 9 divided by 3 is 3. 1/3 is our answer. And that is it. Lesson 1-2 done. All right, see you later. Bye-bye.